Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to another lecture for Computer Science 9618 AS level. And today we are going to start section number 6, that is security, privacy and data integrity. Today we are going to start our discussion for section number 6.1, that is data security, and the 6.1 is going to be covered in 2 lectures inshallah, and this is going to be the part 1 for it. Security, privacy and integrity of data. So what exactly is data integrity? Data integrity is concerned with preventing data from being corrupted, deleted or rendered inaccessible. Anything that causes your data to be inaccurate, anything that causes your data to be deleted, anything that causes your data to be inaccessible or corrupted, that thing is always a threat to the integrity of data. The main purpose of data integrity is to make sure that the data is consistent or accurate no matter where it is being used. If it is not accurate or if it is inconsistent, then data is really not much of any use. Then we have data privacy, the process of ensuring that those with authenticated access to system and data are the only ones which are able to view that data, and they are only able to view data for which they have the authority, such as a clerk in an office may be able to view the form to input records for a new customer, but they should not be able to access personal details of the customer. Similarly, in a supermarket, the cashier may be able to generate bill receipts for a customer and charge them for the billed amount, but they should not be able to see how many total sales has been done up till now. That is not they are not authorized for that. Only the store manager is able to see that sales chart, etc. User access levels should be implemented in computers or in networks to ensure that data privacy is fully active. This is achieved partly by data protection laws. Some of the basic guiding principles of data protection laws are: data must be fairly and lawfully processed. Data can only be processed for the stated purpose. If you are taking data from a customer for the purpose of generating their bill, then you should not be using that data elsewhere. Data must be adequate, relevant and non-excessive. Data must be accurate. Data must not be kept longer than necessary. If you are taking client's data, then as long as it is necessary, keep it with you. As long as the necessity ends, you should delete the data from your systems, as you are not authorized or it is not lawful to keep it for prolonged periods of time without any reason. Data must be processed in accordance with the data subject's rights, or whoever is the owner of the data or the subject of the data, that software, that person has some rights, and you should only process the data in accordance with those rights. Data must be kept secure. Nobody else must be able to steal the data from you. If you have taken some data from a client, data must not be transferred to another country unless that country also has adequate protection. For example, there's a multinational company which has its offices or branches in 5 different countries. Their head office is in one country. Let's say their head office is in the United States of America, and their branch offices are in Sri Lanka, in Malaysia, in Indonesia, in Pakistan and so on. Now their branch offices must not transfer the data for the local customers that they have acquired to their head office, which is in another country, which is in USA. So technically, the data protection laws or the guiding principles state that you must not be transferring data that you collected in one country to another country unless it is absolutely necessary, and unless and until that country where you are trying to transfer the data has adequate data protection laws. Data security. Data security is concerned with stopping unauthorized access to computer systems and the data that they hold. Common threats to the security of data includes hacking, social engineering, and accidental distribution of sensitive data. If you don't know what hacking or social engineering is, I suggest you stop this lecture over here and go to my lecture, O-level lecture, section 5.3, cybersecurity. Have a go through and you'll get to know what these terms means. There are many examples of businesses and organizations that have been badly affected by breaches of data security. Mostly banks are their targets. In government and medical systems, this can often result in serious harm to the individual. Security can be split into two components, both of which are equally important: the data security and the system or computer security, or you can say the data security and the physical security. Data is often sent across the internet and other networks through different communication media on unsecured or easy to hack media. Hence, the media or the transmission that you are doing, it's the however you are doing the transmission, whether you are using unguided transmission or you're using fiber optic or coaxial cable or whatever you are using for transmitting your data, that medium must be protected itself so that nobody else can tap into your network and steal your data. This is also achieved through authentication, as well as encryption of data, end-to-end encryption of network connections, and the use of public and private keys. For example, school. Password protecting the BIOS screen for all the computers in school so the students are not able to mess with the BIOS setting of any of the computers. Or disabling USB access on the school devices, or requiring user authentication by making the users or the students enter username and passwords in order to log in to the desktop, or requiring keycard or FOB access to enter the school grounds. FOB is a free onboard access system where you have to input a specific password on a small keypad, or you have to swipe a magnetic card before the door can be opened. Methods for data or system security. The first method is authentication, the process of verifying the data. It can be done by using user accounts, where the network manager sets up a lot of user IDs and passwords, and a user ID and password is required to log on to a system or website. The entered ID and password are cross-checked against a secure database to verify that they match up with existing records. If they don't match, access is not granted. Then we have passwords, which can be used to restrict access to data or systems. Passwords can be applied in form of biometrics as well. Passwords should be strong enough and be changed frequently to maintain security. Strong passwords should contain at least one capital letter, at least one numerical value, and at least one special symbol such as @ *, or and symbol. Example of a strong password is something like this, whereas example of a weak password is something like this. You should be able to tell the difference between a strong and weak password by looking at a given example. Then we have biometrics. It is an authentication technique relying upon the unique characteristics of human body such as voice or face recognition, fingerprint scan or retina scan. A sample of voice is recorded and compared to a pre-stored pattern in order to verify a person. Similarly, the images of face, fingerprints, or the image of pattern of blood vessels in the retina are taken and compared to pre-stored images to verify a person. Fingerprint scans are most common and the most easiest method of verification, whereas retina scans can be tiring as the recipient has to sit completely still for 10 to 15 seconds and has to look into a camera or a scanner for the retina image to be taken. An example of biometric login is displayed below, where an application is using fingerprint verification to log in. Okay, here is the image. I'll show you. Here's an image of an app that uses Touch ID or the user's fingerprints to log in. The user simply touches over here and then puts their finger onto the fingerprint scanner of their cell phone, and if the fingerprint matches, they are allowed access to their dashboard. Then we have the two-factor authentication or 2FA. When a user tries to log in, a unique code is generated and sent to them through email, while another code is sent through SMS. User is required to enter both the codes within a given time, which is usually 1 minute or 1.5 minutes, in order to gain access to their dashboards. Nowadays, a better version of 2FA technically sends the same code through both email and SMS. User can open either of them, either their email or their SMS, and then enter the code from over there. However, still the sites which are more sensitive, which require a higher level of security, they usually send you different OTPs or different one-time passwords on both your email address and your SMS, and you often have to enter both of them in order to gain access to the website. Then we have the key card access. Key card access systems are a security system that allows user to access doors with a card instead of a key. That card technically contains a magnetic strip or a magnetic chip that communicates with the login system and either opens the door or denies the access. This is often done in hotels where users, instead of a key, they are given a card which they can use to access their rooms. Key card systems control access permissions at different levels of the organization and keep track of the customers, employees, contractors, and other personnel accessing certain areas of your facility. The key card system looks something like this. Then we have the this one. Then we have the digital signature. It is an advanced form of authentication which uses asymmetric encryption. The sender encrypts the message into a string of gibberish using a hashing algorithm. The generated hash is then encrypted using the private key and is sent along the message. The receiver decrypts the hash by using their public key and puts the message into the same hashing algorithm once again and generates a hash. If the generated hash matches the one sent along the message, then the message is believed to be accurate. Otherwise, message is discarded and the sender is asked to resend it. Here's a diagram explaining the process. If Mary has to send some data or document, first of all, Mary is going to put it under through a hashing algorithm and generate a hash. Hash is just a string of gibberish or fixed length strings that contain random characters. Hashes are one way only. You can convert a document into a hash through complex mathematical formulas, but you cannot reverse engineer a hash into the original document. Anyways, that hash is encrypted with Mary's private key and is sent along with the actual data or document through the network to the user, which to the receiver, which in this case is named as James. Once James receives these files, he is first of all going to use Mary's public key in order to retrieve the hash that was generated by Mary and was sent along with the message. James is then going to use the same hashing algorithm and put a copy of this received document into the hashing algorithm and generate a hash of his own. He is then going to compare both copies of the hash. If the file has not been changed during transmission, then both hashes should be exactly same. If the hashes do not match or they are not equal, then data or document is believed to be unauthentic. Otherwise, they are believed to be authentic and they are accepted. This is known as digital signature. This whole process is known as digital signature, and this is how different processes, different websites, web servers and browsers often identify each other. Next, we have access levels. Access levels refer to the privileges a user has within a system or network. In computer security, access levels are assigned to each user account. The higher the level, the greater the privileges. For example, with the administrator rights would have full control over the entire system, whereas a normal user would only have limited access, such as a normal user can only enter data into a system, but they cannot view or retrieve by using a query any type of information from the database, such as they cannot see what was the total amount of sales for last week and so on. Okay, so we are going to end our first lecture of 6.1 over here. I hope you have understood everything that we have discussed so far. If you have any problems, feel free to ask them in comments below. I'll be very sure to get back to you and reply to all your queries. If you have not subscribed to my channel already, please subscribe and share it with your friends as well. Lastly, if you need a hard copy of my notes for A-levels, AS level computer science, or O-levels IGCSE computer science, or O-levels or IGCSE physics, you can use the form link given in the description. I'll see you guys in the next lecture. Till then, take care. Allah Hafiz.